DartPad is an online code editor for the Dart language, and in addition to executing regular Dart programs, it can actually also run some Flutter programs and show graphical output. It essentially enables students to learn Dart without having to set up a development environment locally. It looks like this. It's a website at dartpad.dev, and you'll notice on the left-hand side you have an editor. On the right-hand side you'll have a console or a graphical output if you're using the Flutter version of DartPad, which we'll show in just a second. And what's also nice is it also has quick links to documentation. It's really great for learning. Now you may be wondering, should I use DartPad to start learning or try to install Dart and Flutter everything locally? Well, later on in the course, we'll actually explore downloading and installing Dart and Flutter locally. However, it can actually be quite a tedious process, as you can imagine, because Dart and Flutter need to set up a bunch of tools in order to compile to the native platforms and web platform. So we highly encourage you to first learn using DartPad. Otherwise, you're going to have to spend maybe an hour plus to get everything set up locally, and that can be really annoying and impede your learning process. So instead, go ahead and just learn on DartPad to start off with, and then once you want to develop your own application that you actually plan on producing or shipping to a device, then shift over to your local installation. But for now, we highly recommend you just use dartpad.dev. So speaking of which, let's just quickly explore DartPad and run our first line of code. We'll go to dartpad.dev. I'm going to head to my browser now. Here I am at dartpad.dev. Again, this is a super useful interface where we're going to do a lot of our coding to start out with because it allows us to just quickly dive in and start learning how to program in the Dart programming language. And it also supports importing the Flutter framework as a Flutter package. So you can see here on the left-hand side I have my editor. So I have my editor where I can write code, and then if I want to, I can click Run. And then if I run, I'll see the output of this Dart script here in the console. And you'll notice that as I highlighted over things like main, there's this little documentation window that will later on be able to be used to directly jump to documentation and understand how things work. And if you want, you can go ahead and different size these windows. So for example, if you're just coding and don't want to see the console, you can switch it over here, or you can even delete the console, essentially clear the console and get rid of it, and then push it all the way over here while you're coding. And then when you're ready to see your output, you code it all the way over here. So again, clear console over here on the right-hand side. Now, something to keep in mind is it's very likely DartPad is not going to be able to save your code, especially if you close out this window. So if you do want to save this code, you should copy it and then paste it into an editor. It can even be something as simple as Notepad. And then you're just going to use .dart, that is .dart, as the file extension. So it will be something like, my code, and then .dart. Again, this is not the actual code. You would save the file name as .dart. But pretty much as we begin to learn Dart, there's probably not going to be too much worth saving because we actually provide that zip file of notes in the first lecture that gives you all the Dart files that you can copy and paste into DartPad to begin with. So again, don't worry too much, just really focus on learning the basics of Dart. Now I did mention DartPad can also run Flutter, so all you need to do to run that is click on New Pad and then click on Flutter, and then you can see an example of Flutter. And let's go ahead and open up a different sample to really show the fact that it's using Flutter. The base example, if you notice here, it actually just says something like Hello World, and it's just a little widget with a dark blue background, so you can see Hello World. And if you want, you could edit the text to kind of play around with this. So if I put in Jose and run this, you should now see Jose pop up in a little bit once it's done compiling and running this. So it goes from Hello World, and then it's going to go into Jose. So probably not the best example in my opinion to show how cool Flutter is. So instead, let's do something with a little more pizzazz. Let's try draggable and physics. So click on that one, and if you click on run that new script, you'll see a draggable card. And I accidentally clicked run twice, but now you should be able to grab this card and drag it and see it kind of flow back there. It's just a little widget here. Okay, so we're going to learn a lot more about Flutter later on, but for right now, we'll go back to Dart. As you went back to Dart, you probably noticed this little tab that says HTML. Remember we discussed that Dart can go to native platforms or technically web platforms as well, which means if you're thinking about web, you need to think about things like HTML and CSS. If you plan on editing those along with Dart, you can click on HTML, or essentially switch that tab or that little switch over, and then click on Dart, and you'll notice it also gives you HTML and CSS to use. So for example, I can go CSS and then change the head or heading 1 color based off your knowledge of HTML and CSS. We're not going to focus too much on developing for web applications with Dart to begin with. So instead, when we actually just use Dart, we're just going to use Dart with no HTML and CSS. So we'll just click on Dart and we'll have something that looks like this. So let's go ahead and try the very basics of running our code, kind of our own hello world example. I kind of don't like this example here because it jumps straight into a for loop, which if you didn't know how to do that with Dart, it's not super nice and clean. So instead, let's start with a true hello world, which is just printing hello world. So let's delete this. So we got to set up our main script of Dart. So that means we type out void space main, open and close parentheses, curly braces, and then we will go ahead and print. And now you're going to print hello world and then pass in a semicolon. Okay, and you saw there were some errors. It was basically doing an analysis on this to make sure it was going to run. But now, as we typed, we got rid of those errors. And then if you click on run, you should now be able to see hello world in the console. Don't forget that semicolon there. It's pretty good about reporting errors, though. You'll see the errors being reported as issues here. And that's it. Okay, so now we ran our first hello world. So we know about DartPad. It's at dartpad.dev. If you want to save this, just copy and paste this code into something like Notepad or a text editor and save it as a .dart file, and then you'll be good to go and reference that code later. If you want to clear the console, click here to clear the console. But that's pretty much all we wanted to cover here. Let's start learning about the Dart programming language. I'll see you at the next lecture.